Alright, so welcome back. I am finally back on the Jaguar build. I had to take a little detour to build a welding cart for my new TIG welder, so that's kind of exciting. I guess, depends on your definition of exciting. But anyways, so back onto this, and I need to do some more welding on welding. Yeah, I still have welding on my brain. I need to do some more painting on the engine. I got the black on here. I don't even remember where I left off last time, but remember I have the Jaguar emblem in here. I don't know if it's gonna, you can see it. It's not as pronounced as I was hoping, but once this car is all put together, you're never going to see that anyways. That's going to be completely hidden. So I'm not even sure why I did that. But anyways, I need to finish painting this. I need to finish the engine, but it's just been way too cold and wet and rainy and drizzly and just plain too cold to do any painting. So while I'm waiting for that, I thought I should start rebuilding all of this. Now, when I got this was all busted up, just barely hanging together. So I need to rebuild all of this, and it's really in bad shape, and it doesn't even really look like what the real car looks like. I've looked at a lot of photos online of this whole area, and there's a lot of good references. But I'm going to have to rebuild all of this, and I'm going to do it with brass stock. So this is, 3mm square. That'll be for these runners here. And I've got some 5mm square. It's close enough to 5. Yeah, close enough to 5mm square. And that'll be for this part right up there. And I also have some round tubing for here and these pieces here. But I need to start off with these. I need to get these made. And on the real car, there's a piece that comes in, let's see. There's a piece that comes in like this that the kit does provide. And also in the real car, there's a piece that comes in down here that the kit does not provide. So, yeah, I need to remake this, but out of brass. I think what I'm going to do is cut out some pieces I just kind of marked this one where I'm going to cut it. I'm just going to start cutting out some pieces to build it up with. I'll probably build some kind of a jig or a fixture so I can solder it all together. But again, right now, I'm not perfectly sure exactly how that's going to go down. So let me get some stuff set up here, and I'll get back with you when I'm ready to start soldering stuff together. Okay, so I know I said that the next step is going to be remaking these out of brass, and I started doing that, and then I realized that in order to do that, it needs to be able to connect onto the bulkhead squarely and properly. And that's when I realized that the bulkhead is not made right. Now, I've said before that I'm going to have to completely redo all of this, cut that off and make one, cut that off. There's supposed to be details on here. Well, as you can tell, I already modified it here a little bit. And when you look at photos of the real car, they're indented like that. Here's one I cut off on this side. So that's how it was, like that. So I just masked off, and I just eyeballed it from a photo online. So that angle is probably not perfect, but it'll work. I hope it works. If not, it's fixable. But so I just masked off what I needed to cut, and just using a razor saw like this, I just sliced through next to the tape to remove that section of it. And then to rebuild it in this way, that's with styrene. So once that's cut out, I just take this and put it on, and then go in with your favorite pencil and just kind of scribe there, and then cut that out and just glue it in place. That needs to be sanded down better. I just did a rough sanding around this one, so that needs to be finished sanded. So once I get this side closed out like this one, then hopefully I'll be ready to start fitting. Oh, not yet. I'll need to cut out a square hole here and here. That's where the pipe or the square tubing will go in. So let me get the other side flushed out. Then I'll start cutting some brass pieces to fit properly. So when I get back to you here in just a second, hopefully we'll be ready to start soldering some parts together. Okay, so I think I'm actually making progress, and I think it's actually in the right direction. So let me show you what I've got going on so far. Get some of these pieces out of the way here. So I started, well, I said I had to clean some of this up. There are some molded in details that I'm going to redo anyways. They were kind of in the way, so I just sanded them off roughly. Obviously, all of this still needs a lot more work, but I need to get this shaped proper for the main frame. Now, I kind of screwed up. I cut a hole here. That's not where the hole goes. It goes here. So I cut a hole so that rod would go in like this, but that's not where it goes. It goes in like that. So just went in with a little drill bit and then started carving it out with the X-Acto knife, and then took a little file and just kind of went in with the file until the rod would fit in this way. And I've got these side walls all filled in. Again, I know there's a lot of work to do in here, but that'll be done later. So then next, I took a piece of glass and I laid this down, and I just glued some pieces of wood block to there with some CA, obviously some masking tape. So those blocks will hold this in position. It'll keep it straight. Those tape lines are marking out where this part will sit, like that. And everything is straight and square. You probably can't see it. Well, you might be able to. But I've got some lines here and here. Those are extended straight out from where that lower pipe fits in right down here, straight out. So this will keep everything square and true. So I started off, and again, I'm looking at pictures that I looked at online. If you just do a search, like an image search for Jaguar XKE engine or front subframe, you can get a lot of really nice photos of this. I don't have any measured drawings, so I'm using the dimensions from this as best as I can, as well as eyeballing photos. So I went ahead, I got this first one done. Well, not done, but I got this first step done. This is for this piece. Now there's going to be another part. This is this round tubing. I have to drill a hole in here, and that'll go in like that. So that'll go in that way, but I still have to drill that hole in here. Now, one thing that I was thinking about, I could have just fixed all of this, but when I got it, it was broken in several pieces. So I would have had to have made several glue joints, which would have looked like crap. So I could have just remade all of this out of styrene stock. But when you think about it, this holds the suspension for the front wheel. So half of the weight of the car, the front half of the weight of the car, is resting on this. And I wanted something a little more substantial than plastic. And plus, these pieces are warped, they're bent, they're no good. That's why I'm remaking it out of brass. And I'm not looking for perfect, millimeter to millimeter, perfect true scale. I just want it to look better, and I want it to be structurally sound. And so that's kind of my goal here. Like I said, just eyeballing some of the angles and stuff without measured drawings, it's going to be close enough. And hopefully when somebody looks at the finished project, like if you look at a photo of it, it'll take them a couple of seconds to realize they're looking at a model and not the real car. That's kind of the goal here. So anyways, this one sets in like that. It's actually going to be spaced off the glass by about that much. So that one sets in here like that, and then so that's kind of how that rests this way. So I just started with these pieces here. Now I kind of already messed up. This piece right here, which will hold the motor mount right over here, which I cut out a piece for the motor mount. I'm not going to solder it on yet, but it's just a 45-degree cut, and that'll get soldered on right here. Now, before you leave a comment on how to pronounce the word solder, I did look it up, and you can say solder or solder. I have a hard enough time pronunciating normal words. So I grew up pronouncing it solder. I'm not going to change now, so get over it. If it bothers you every time I say solder, then I apologize now. So anyways, where I messed up is this bigger piece. By the way, this is 3mm square. This is 5mm square. I should have cut it. Notice how that one extends all the way up. That one I just cut flush to the bottom. This one extends all the way up. It's not that big of a deal, but you know, I can always add a little piece in there when it's all done. So again, it's not that critical. Now the way I'm holding these together to join them is I have some parts here. I have a scrap piece of aluminum, and actually I need to mark this first. So I need to mark, and I went ahead and cut out these pieces. So I have one for that lower rail and one for the upper rail for the other side. So I want to mark out this, and I'm going to use the one that I made as a guide just to make sure that it stays symmetrical. And you know, I'm going to mark, I'll do a better job with like a straight edge and a ruler. Mark where that goes, and before you solder it, you have to sand the surface and clean it. You'll notice there's a lot of black crap along here. If you don't sand it and clean it before you solder it, this just turns all black. And maybe it's my technique. I'll show you how I do this here in just a minute. Maybe it's the flux I'm using, maybe it's my technique, maybe I got it too hot. But I found out that when I cleaned it, or when I sanded it down and cleaned it with acetone, I got much better solder joints. And so if we take a look at a few of them here. You know, this one, that one I'm happy with. Those I'm happy enough with. This one, it's good enough. This one I got a big blob on there and I had to file and sand that off. But you don't want a huge blob of solder on here. And again, when we get to it, I'll kind of show you how I do that. So again, I still have to sand and clean these, but just to give you an idea of how I do this. So I have a scrap piece of aluminum, and I will just put that here, so that goes here. So I will put this here and clamp it. And then I'll take this piece that goes in like that, and try this way. Just like that. Now again, I will check with a square, and I will double check with calipers to make sure that it's the same dimension from the other one. And since it's hanging over in free air, this big aluminum plate kind of acts like a heat sink, which will come in handy when you go to do the other one. Let me show you what I mean here. So let's say it was clamped in like this, and I soldered that. Well then, so I did this one first. Well then if I move it over this way and clamp it, this big aluminum plate will act like a heat sink and help prevent this one from remelting while I do this one. And that really helps. There might be a better method, might be a better way to do it, but so far this is working out for me. So let me get these pieces set up to do that first joint, and then we'll go over to my my table where I do my hot work, and we'll get this thing put together. Okay, so we have the pieces set up the way we talked about before, and it's all straight and true and square. So again, there's a couple of fluxes I use. I have this one. I haven't used this in a while though. What I've been using mostly is this one. And maybe I'll try the other one after this joint just to see if one of them actually works better than the other. But I'm just using a Q-tip in the flux to put the flux onto the joint area. And as far as solder goes, well, I have this. That's a little heavy. I've been using this, and it's just I don't even know what kind it is. It came in a tube. of something a while ago. But this seems to be working okay. So I'll just keep using this stuff. And I'm just using a Bernzomatic propane torch. And my biggest concern is right now is not burning my camera when I pull the torch away. So just gently going over it, and yeah, I know I've got a rubber tip on it clamp that'll probably get kind of melty. So just going over, not trying to get it super hot. I just want to get it warm enough until it just starts to melt the solder. And that actually flowed in pretty nice. And one thing I commonly do, not wanting to, but I typically put in way too much. And that actually, I'm going to leave that one alone. That's pretty much perfect right there. I've gotten into a habit of just putting on way too much, and then I get a big blob, and then I have to sand or file it down. See if that'll focus on there. So notice it started to discolor a little bit. I got a little bit of black gunk in there. It probably could have been cleaner before I started, and I think that should be a good joint. All right. So let me take this off, clean it up a little bit, and I'll flip it around and we'll get the other side on. This is just 150. I think it's 150. Yeah, 150. And, you know, it's a little premature to be doing this because I'll have to do it again once it's all done. But just to kind of clean it up a little bit. A little bit of a buildup here. I'll probably just take that off with a little file or something. But, yeah, I'm pretty happy with that one. Again, one of the keys is to, I think, not get it too hot, which I might have. I didn't have to get it as hot as I did. And don't put in too much solder. I mean, if you do, you can clean it off, sand it up. But, so now this will get, so now this will get clamped in on that side, and the other piece will get clamped in here, and I'll just do the same thing, repeat the same process. And that's pretty much how I did, you know, this entire thing here. Sorry, I keep getting the light. And that's pretty much how the entire thing is going to go. It's just a constant repetition of measuring, cutting, fitting, getting everything clamped and square and cleaned, and then soldered together, and then test fit it. And without actual measured drawings, it's a little bit challenging. So again, like I said before, I'm just using the kit parts to hit the critical points. You know, for example, like right here, coming off of here, you'll have the fittings for the suspension for the front wheels. So those points have to be critical, so the car doesn't set too low or high, and so the hood still fits okay. So the critical points I got to make sure I get. But exact angles here, exact dimensions, you know, it's as long as it looks good per the photos, I'm going to be happy with it. So I'll just keep on plugging away at this, and I'll get back to you when I get a little bit more done. Okay, so I was hoping to have more done at this point, but I made a couple of mistakes, both easy to fix. And one was I just didn't order enough material. I underestimated how much of the 3mm stock I needed, so I didn't quite get enough of that. So I just ordered some more a couple of days ago. I'm waiting for that. Hopefully I'll get that by the end of the week, maybe. The other mistake I made was, I don't know how I did this, but for some reason, let me just pull one of these off. I'll show that here in just a second. I had those sitting in like that. They needed to be like that. So I had them 3mm each side. I had each side 3mm too far inboard. That here is an easy enough fix. I just recut them open that way. I had to cut the wall off here, and I'll just have to reglue another one in. That's not that big of a deal. And a little spot to fill in here, again, not that big of a deal. The harder part to fix was on this piece. What I did I drilled, and you can see on the front side a little better, I drilled 4 holes here, and here, and here, and here. And I drilled those 4 holes for these metal pins, these brass pins, that would hold these sides in place, just like that. And that'll hold everything in alignment when I solder it together. But obviously that was 3 millimeters in too far, so I had to re-drill those holes. Now you'll notice on this one, on the top side, I have an extra hole. On the bottom one I didn't, because I actually unsoldered this plate and moved it over. This one, the plate was okay, it was just the hole was wrong. Now when I do the final soldering, I'll just cut a, that one's falling out. I'll just cut a short piece of pin, stick in those holes when I solder it. That'll fill those holes in. So that's not that big of a deal. Right now these pins are just, that one's a little bit loose. These others are a lot tighter, a little bit of a tighter fit. But that holds these, and make sure I get the right way around. That holds these sides in the correct position and the correct alignment. And so that's coming along pretty nicely. I also made the front parts that hold the radiator mount. So that goes on like that. And of course there's another one for the other side, like that. And that'll hold that bar across here, and that's where the hood pivots on. And across the bottom, you've got the tray that the radiator will sit on. It's a radiator mounting tray. All right, so again, this is just an exercise of patience, lots of measuring, like measuring like 10 times, even though I drilled twice here. I measured 10 times and drilled twice. I should have measured 11 times. It's just a lot of careful measurement, cutting, placing, soldering, and this is taking quite a bit longer than I expected. And again, I'm trying to maintain the kit dimensions, but make it look like the real car. For example, that's what the kit parts look like versus what the car parts look like. And I'm thinking it's looking pretty good. One thing I want to talk about real quick though is the radiator tray. Again, that goes on right here. When you compare that to what came in the kit, I think it's quite an improvement. Now this didn't come out as perfect as I was hoping, but for a part that will never be seen, it is much better than what was provided in the kit, and I'm happy with it. Now the way I did this, this is actually my 3rd attempt. The first 2 attempts, let's see if I can find one. It was one of my first attempts, and it was a little not clean edges, a little too wrinkly. The first attempts I made using like a plastic made anvil press tool. And again, it didn't have clean edges. So what I did was I went with some heavier metal pieces. And I had, let's see, so that piece is still super glued down. And I had this little raised piece that was super glued. I should have soldered it together, but it actually turned out okay that it was only glued. So that little raised piece went in there. And then I had this plate with a slot in it with a raised piece here, and this piece was glued on here. So you put your piece of brass across that, flip that, and hammer it down, and it presses out that shape, like that. And it took a few tries, but I eventually got it. And like I said, it's not as perfect as I was hoping, but it is definitely good enough. And I'm fairly happy with it, fairly proud of that. Once it's installed, sanded a little smoother and got a coat of primer on it, and I think it'll look perfectly fine. And like I said, that will never be seen again once the car is put back together. Unless you flip the whole thing upside down, you might catch a little glimpse of the bottom side of it, but that's about it. The other thing I did is I went ahead and made the little bearing blocks for the suspension pieces. So that, let's see, here's the kit part for the suspension, and that just goes in like so. And the way I made that, I just took a long strip of flat stock and a long strip of round tubing, soldered them together, then sliced off 3mm slices. And you know, as you can see, as you start stacking them together like that, you can see how that was on a much longer piece, and I just sliced them into 3mm slices. And these still need to get filed and sanded and smoothed up. And this is a finished one. And I noticed when I started, let me take some of this apart. When I started, actually, I'll put this back on here. When I started test fitting these, and I would put one like here, and then I would put another one here, and I realized that made this really crooked this way. And that's when I noticed that these rods were 3mm too far in. And it's also when I noticed, because I studied a whole lot more photos, and I saw some details that I didn't see before. And that's when I also noticed that this piece here was also too thin, so I had to thicken that up a little bit. Here's the other one. So I had to add 3mm on top of that. So I took a 5mm rod and I cut off 2mm, so that then gets soldered right like that. And again, that does make it more realistic to the real car, as best as I can tell. And so now, when you put those blocks on it for the suspension arms, it's perfectly in line with the one in front of it. And of course, there'll be one on the bottom that goes in kind of like that. That's not perfect realistic to the real car, but for what it is, I think that will work fine. And you know, I'm trying to come up with a happy medium between the kit dimensions versus what the real car looks like. And there's going to be a few areas that aren't perfect as far as what the real car looks like. I'm taking a little bit of artistic license with that, I guess. But anyways, this is where I am. Like I said, it's a lot more time consuming than I first thought when I started. So since I'm waiting for materials and I feel like this video is getting to be way too long, I'm going to end this one here. When I get back to this, I'll have the new materials, and hopefully by the end of the next video I put out on this project, the whole front end will be done, and maybe ready for primer. We'll just kind of have to wait and see how that goes. But anyways, like I said, I'm going to end it here, and I'm going to start on that. I'm going to do some more work on that Robotech project because I need to get some more work on that one. But anyways, so as always, thanks for watching.